everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you're notified when I upload, which will be on Mondays. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some breakfast recipes that you just need to try. Like, these are so unique, like really, but also so delicious at the same time. Most of these will take some time to prepare, so if you're in a rush, I would definitely not recommend making these on the spot. But you could totally do these if you've got some time the night before, because they're just so worth it. So let's get started.
Alright, so this first breakfast we're going to make is this French toast with caramelized banana. So what we're going to do is preheat our oven to 60 degrees, and then we're going to measure out 100 mils of milk and just pour that into a bowl. And then we're going to take 1 egg and just crack that in. Next, we're going to add a teaspoon of stevia and half a teaspoon of vanilla essence. And we're just going to use a fork to combine all that thoroughly, making sure the egg is well beaten. Then we're going to measure out 20 grams of butter, and we're going to take half of that, so 10 grams, and put that in a frying pan. Measuring out the butter isn't really necessary, but I guess I would have the perfect amount of butter for when I needed to use it again later. But we're just going to place the pan on medium heat and wait for the butter to melt. And while we're waiting for the butter to melt, we're going to get out our bread, and you can use whatever bread you want. I'm using this malt and linseed sourdough bread, but honestly anything will work. Vienna bread works really well as well, but I'm just cutting 4 slices of that. And then once the butter's melted, we're gonna dip the bread into the egg mixture, making sure both sides are dipped. And we're going to place them in the pan and do this with all the slices of bread, so make sure you do this quite quickly so each bit of bread cooks relatively for the same amount of time. And then if you haven't quite used all of the French toast mixture, just pour it all in. It's edible, so why not? You don't want it to go to waste. They should take about 5 minutes on each side, or at least until they're golden and a little bit crispy. So after 5 minutes, we're just going to flip these. Probably use a bigger pan than this, but this was what I had. And then once the French toast is all cooked on the other side, we're going to transfer that to the plate and place them in the 60-degree oven just to keep it warm while we make the caramelized bananas. So what we're going to do is place the remaining 10 grams of butter in the pan and just melt that. And in the meantime, we're just going to take a banana and cut it into slices, and then place the slices into the pan, and then add in 3 tablespoons of stevia, a teaspoon of vanilla essence, and 2 tablespoons of water. And we're just going to stir this into the bananas, making sure every slice is coated evenly. And they really only take about 1 minute to cook in the pan, and then you'll know they're ready once the mixture is a consistency of syrup. So when that happens, we're just going to take our French toast out of the oven and serve the caramelized bananas on top. And then I like to add a couple tablespoons of Greek yogurt on top, as well as a tablespoon of walnuts. And then there you have it, French toast with caramelized banana. This is a healthier version of French toast, and the caramelized banana just tastes so good. And you can top it with almost anything you want, or just leave it as is. The choice is yours. Okay, so this next recipe is for these pikelets done 2 ways. So what you're going to do is get out a large bowl, and with a sifter, you're going to sift in 1 cup of self-raising flour, or in my circumstances, what was left in this bag of flour. And then you're going to add in 2 tablespoons of stevia, and then you're going to take a lemon and a lemon zester and zest in around about a teaspoon of lemon zest, or depends on how much of that lemony flavour you want throughout your pikelets. And next, we're going to crack in 1 egg, and then add a third of a cup of Greek yogurt, and sour cream can also work for this as well. And then add in half a cup of milk. And then you're just going to get out a whisk or an electric beater, and you're just going to beat until the mixture is nice and smooth and no lumps are present. Obviously with a whisk this will take a lot longer, but you have to try to get those lumps out as best you can, because you don't want lumpy pikelets, do you? And then we're going to take around about a teaspoon of oil and brush the pan with a pastry brush with the oil. This ensures that we don't add in too much and the pikelets aren't too oily. So we're just going to place the fry pan on the heat and just wait for the oil to warm up. If you might remember from a mistake I made from one of my previous breakfast recipe videos where I made pancakes and they ended up being a little too oily. I've learnt my lesson now, it won't happen again. And once it is, we're going to drop tablespoons of the batter into the fry pan, which my fry pan holds about 4, but every fry pan will be different. So we're going to cook these for 2 minutes on one side and then flip them and cook the other side for another 2 minutes or until it's all golden. And once they are, just transfer these to a plate and keep going until we've used up all the mixture. And this mixture makes about 16 pikelets, which in my case, I was actually cooking for 2 people. So you can halve the recipe if you're only cooking for yourself, or double it if you're cooking for more than 2 people, depending on how many you all want, of course. And if you want to make them a little bit bigger or smaller, it's totally up to you. So we're just continuing to add more of the pikelet batter into the pan, and I tried to do like one big stack, but that ended up toppling over, so we weren't going to do that. And then once we've finally finished cooking all the pikelets, it's time to top them. So I don't know why I didn't separate the pikelets first before doing the toppings. Don't follow by my example, because you don't want to cross-contaminate, particularly if you're catering for anyone with food allergies, which I wasn't, so it's all good, but still, something to keep in mind. And so for my toppings, I just took a banana and just broke it off into slices, not even using a knife because I couldn't be bothered. And then adding about a cup's worth of fresh blueberries and some generous spoonfuls of Greek yogurt. And then that was it for my pikelets. And then for the other person's pikelets, they requested them to have theirs buttered and then some maple syrup drizzled over. And then here are these pikelets done 2 ways. See, I even plated them differently. I did mine with the banana, blueberries and Greek yogurt in like a little stack with the toppings sort of just arranged around them like a little bed, and then the ones with butter and maple syrup scattered along the plate. So feel free to try both of these out. They're both amazing. You could do half and half or even combine both. It all comes down to what you want and what whoever you're making this for wants. It's all pretty versatile. This next recipe is what I call Christmas breakfast, as this is what I had for breakfast on Christmas Day last year, the worst Christmas ever, because we had it in isolation after we were supposed to go on holiday, hence why I'm wearing a mask in these clips. This is honestly a pretty basic recipe, as it's just bacon and eggs and toast, but I still wanted to share it with you, so I'm just pouring a little bit of oil in the fry pan and placing that on the heat. And we'll just let that warm up, and once it is, which I determined by the old hand trick of just waving it over the pan, we can place the bacon into the pan and just let that sizzle and get all nice and crispy, depending on how crispy you want it. I like mine to be crispy, but I still want it to have some pinkness to it, if you know what I mean. But while the bacon's cooking, I'm just gonna make my toast. So I'm starting a new loaf of this bread here. I'm not sure what type of bread it is. I think it's some sort of wholemeal sourdough, I'm not too sure, but I'm cutting the first 3 pieces of it, including the end, which I honestly don't mind, and just gonna place these in the toaster and toast them on the regular setting, and then once it's popped up, I'm gonna toast it again, but a notch down, except for the end piece, because that was already toasted enough, and I didn't want that to burn. And then we'll check on the bacon and move that around with our spatula, and give it a little flip. And then I'm gonna crack in 2 eggs and fry them up. And the perfect fried egg for me is over medium, I think is the correct term as to how I like my eggs. Fully cooked with the yolk not runny enough to ooze out everywhere, but without it being super well done, if you know what I mean. So once done that, our toast should be ready by now. And I'm just gonna flip my eggs. So once I've done that, start spreading my toast. And I felt like having a mixture of spreads today. So the first slice, I spread with peanut butter. The next one, I did a layer of butter and a layer of honey, because I just really like that combo. And then I spread the remaining slice with jam. So some lovely variety there. And then by that point, the eggs have been cooked to my liking, and so is the bacon. So we'll just serve that up alongside the toast. On the side, as I don't like my bacon and eggs directly on the toast, as it just makes it soggy, and I don't like soggy toast. But there we go. That is Christmas breakfast. I don't know if it's very Christmassy. It's something I would have at any time during the year, but it just so happened to be Christmas Day when I filmed this. The worst Christmas day ever, I might add, but we were doing our best with the situation at hand, and this was my breakfast on that particular day. Okay, so this next thing that we're going to make are these apple and blueberry muffins. So we're going to set the oven to 220 degrees, and we're going to get out a muffin tin and line it with 12 muffin cases. We're going to get out a large bowl and sift in a cup of self-raising flour. Then we're going to add half a cup of stevia and half a cup of oats or oat bran. Next, we're going to peel the skin of 2 Granny Smith apples. And what we're going to do is just grate the apples with a grater. You don't even have to core them or anything, as you won't be able to grate anymore once you get to the core. But if any seeds do fall in, please take them out. They're poisonous, so you don't want to be eating those. But once we have finished grating the apples, we're just going to stir them into the flour, stevia and oats. And then, because it goes so well with apple, we're going to add half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Then we're going to measure out 60 grams of butter. And we're going to place it in the microwave for 30 seconds to completely melt it. And then to the butter, we're going to add in 1 egg and 2/3 of a cup of milk. So 2 of these 1/3 cups. And we're going to give this a little mix. I'm just using a fork, or you can use a whisk, use whatever. But we're then going to add this to the grated apple and dry ingredients and just give it a little stir. I'm going to take a cup's worth of blueberries, but we're going to give this all a stir, and the mixture is supposed to look lumpy. So this is actually where lumpy mixture comes in handy. But once we're done, we're going to fill the muffin liners with the batter. I'm doing the old trick of grabbing a spoonful and scraping it off with a knife into the muffin pans. And then we're going to place this into the oven to bake for 15 to 20 minutes. And then you can check they're done with the old skewer test. And if it runs out clean, or if the muffin tops are golden, take them out of the oven. And then once you've gotten them out of the muffin pans, serve them up, as these are best eaten warm. And there you have it. These apple and blueberry muffins. They don't look very appetizing, but they are delicious and very nutritious. And you can even take these with you to school or work on the go, as they're just so convenient. Besides, what's not to love about a good old apple and blueberry muffin? Okay, so this next recipe is for these homemade blueberry bagels. And this is my first time making bagels at home, and they didn't really turn out the greatest, but I still wanted to share this recipe with you. But you can easily recreate this recipe if you tweak it and don't do what I did. So we're going to preheat our oven to 200 degrees, and then in a jug, we're going to add 120 mils of water, a teaspoon of yeast, which is equivalent to this sachet of yeast, and a teaspoon of sugar. And what we're going to do is give that a stir. I'm going to set that aside for 5 minutes in order for the yeast to ferment and get all frothy. And in a large bowl, we're going to add 1 1/4 cups of flour, so 5 1/4 cups in total. Now here is where I went wrong. I used plain flour, but for bagels, you're supposed to use bread flour, because otherwise they're not going to have the right texture, and so that's why mine didn't turn out so great. So if you actually put in the effort to get yourself some bread flour, the bagels are going to turn out a whole lot better. But that aside, to the flour, we're going to add in half a teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/3 of a cup of blueberries. Frozen would probably work better, but fresh was all I had. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of stevia, which I think would work just the same as sugar, half a teaspoon of bread improver, and around about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And we're just going to combine this all with a knife and make a well in the center. And to this well, we're going to pour in our yeast mixture and just stir it all with a knife until the mixture starts to come together, forming a ball of dough. Then we're going to lightly flour a clean bench, and we're just going to knead the dough firmly for 5 minutes. Make sure you're patient with this step, as you want the dough to be all smooth and elastic. And if the dough starts to stick to the bench, just add a little bit more flour and continue kneading. Then once it has reached the desired texture, just cover it with a bowl. You can use the same bowl you did to make the dough with, and you're just going to leave this to rest for about 5 minutes, because you want to give it time to rise by half. Next, we're going to get out a large saucepan, place it on a high heat, and add in 1.5 litres of water and 2 tablespoons of stevia, and just give that a mix. And we're going to bring this to the boil, and at this point we can go and check in on our dough. We're just going to to lightly flour our hands and then cut the dough into 4 portions. We can just use a butter knife for this. I'm going to roll each portion into a ball so that they resemble the shape of bagels. And then with a lightly floured finger, we're going to push a hole in the middle of all of the balls. Make sure the hole goes all the way through. And we're just going to leave them on the bench for about 10 minutes just so they can rise a little bit more. Now back to the water, you should reduce the heat to medium and bring it to a simmer. Once you've added the bagels, you're going to cook them for 3 minutes, and you're going to use a slotted spoon to turn them over and cook for another 3 minutes on the other side. And then after those 3 minutes, we're going to get out a baking tray and line it with some baking paper, and we'll take those bagels out and place them on the tray. And one of the bagels fell apart completely. But assuming that this has not happened, place the bagels into the oven for about 20 minutes or until they're cooked through and nicely golden brown like a bagel should be. As you can see, these definitely could have done for much longer in the oven. But that aside, feel free to add any kind of toppings you want. I'm just adding a spoonful of Greek yogurt on each bagel and some more blueberries on top. And there you have it, these homemade blueberry bagels. These look nothing like the ones that you'll get at a nice cafe. I don't even know what these are. So much was wrong with them. They tasted alright, but these definitely could be improved upon, let's say. So with the tweaks that I mentioned in this recipe, your bagels should turn out better than mine. And hopefully mine will turn out better next time if I do choose to attempt this again. Okay, so this last recipe is baked beans with pita. I think that's how you pronounce it. But what we're going to do is preheat our oven to 220 degrees. And we're going to fill up a measuring jug with 100 mils of warm water. And we're going to add in a teaspoon of yeast, which in my case was this sachet of yeast, and half a teaspoon of sugar. We're going to give this a little stir, then fill up a small bowl with hot water and place the measuring jug with yeast mixture in it. So basically what we did when making the blueberry bagels, except slightly different measurements. But in a bowl, we're going to add in a cup of flour. If you have it, use bread flour, but plain flour was all I had. Half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of bread improver. And if the mixture hasn't completely frothed by that point, you can start preparing a little bit to make the baked beans. We're essentially making 2 things at once here, so good time management skills are recommended. But we're going to take an onion, chop off the end, peel off the skin, and dice it as best you can. This isn't really dicing it, I just prefer to finely chop it. But if you want it smaller, dice it. And then we'll return to our dry ingredients for the pita and make a well in the center with a knife and add in the yeast mixture, which should hopefully be frothy and fermented by now. And we're also going to add a teaspoon of oil, and we're going to mix all that together with a table knife to form the consistency of a dough. Then lightly flour the bench, or in my case, I just used the flour left over in the bowl. And we're going to knead the dough for about 5 minutes or until it's smooth and elastic, like what we did with the bagels. And then going to cover it with a bowl and leave it to rest for about 3 minutes. And then once those minutes are up, we're going to remove the bowl and try to flatten the dough into the shape of a rectangle. Do this as best you can. I'm not very good at this, and I didn't really know how to do this, but just do your best. This was the best I could do without wrecking it. So once you've got somewhat of a rectangle, use your fingers to put dimples in the top, and it's up to you how dimple you want it, I guess. But once we have done that, we're going to cover it again with the bowl and set it aside so it can rise. And then we'll actually get into making the baked beans while we're waiting. So we're going to get out a saucepan and heat a tablespoon of oil. And while that's heating up, I'm going to get out some ham. I'm just using some frozen ham that was left over from that Christmas ham I talked about and used in several recipes in some of my other recipe videos. I'm taking about 3 tablespoons worth and I'm just placing it in the microwave to defrost it. If you don't have frozen ham, obviously skip this step. And by that point, the oil will be all heated up, so we're going to add the ham to it, as well as the chopped up onion that we did earlier. And then we're going to add in half a teaspoon of garlic powder, and mix that all together until soft. And we actually make our own stock, which we freeze into big stock blocks. So I'm just going to add that in, and the heat will all melt it. I'm actually using ham stock, which you can actually see the leftovers of that on that tray there. But that's not important right now. You can use any stock you want, and if you're using liquid stock, use about 60 mils of it. We're then gonna add in a can of crushed tomatoes, 2 teaspoons of tomato paste, 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce, and a teaspoon of mustard powder. We're then gonna take a can of cannellini beans, get out a sieve, and pour the beans into it to drain the liquid over the sink, give that all a good shake, and then add them to the rest of the ingredients. And we're gonna leave this to simmer for about 30 minutes, or until the beans are all tender and soft, and the sauce is thickened reasonably. And then back to the pita, we're gonna pour a little bit of oil over and use a pastry brush to just brush it all around. And then we're gonna sprinkle over half a tablespoon of sesame seeds and half a tablespoon of nigella seeds, so half and half. And you probably should have put the bread on the tray at this point, so you're not making a mess all over the bench like I did. So before all this, make sure you have out a baking tray and that you line it with some baking paper. Then with the pita on it, we're going to place it in the oven and cook for about 10 minutes, or until it's all golden on top. As you can see, this probably could have had a bit more time in the oven, so maybe 15 to 20 minutes. But this is actually enough for 2 servings, so I'm just cutting it in half and serve it up alongside the baked beans. Again, I only used half as this was enough for 2, so I had leftovers of this the following day for breakfast, which was nice. But then there you have it, baked beans with pita. This takes baked beans on toast to a whole other level, doesn't it? While classic beans on toast will always be a nostalgia food for me, it's always nice to make a modern twist on the culinary classic with homemade baked beans and homemade pita bread. It's amazing.
So that is it for these breakfast ideas that are just so unique and delicious, and I hope that you'll try these out if you have some time. I cannot stress this enough. So I hope that when you do have time, you'll try these out and let me know what you think of them, because they're so good, right? So thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any new videos. So, till next time, in my next video, I shall see you then. Goodbye.